So you think humans invented things because we're smart, innovative, and forward-thinking creatures who care about progress and making the world a better place for everyone? Yeah, that's adorable. The truth is, most of the everyday products you use, without thinking twice, weren't born from some genius sitting in a lab dreaming about convenience or comfort. They were literally created because people were committing crimes at an industrial scale, and society collectively said, "Okay, this has to stop before we all lose our minds." We're talking about stuff you probably touch today, things sitting in your kitchen right now, objects so mundane you wouldn't even consider them revolutionary. But every single one of them exists because at some point in history, humans were being so spectacularly terrible to each other that someone had to step in with a solution. And the wildest part? Most people have no idea. You're out here using a bottle of ketchup or driving past a streetlight without realizing these things were battlefields in the war against human chaos. So buckle up, because we're about to tour through 10 ordinary products that were invented specifically to stop mass crimes. And I promise you, by the end of this, you're going to look at your pantry differently, maybe even with a little respect for the fact that civilization is held together by condiments and light bulbs. Let's start with something you've probably used this week without giving it a second thought. Milk bottles with those little paper caps or sealed lids you have to peel off before you can drink. Those weren't invented because someone thought, you know what would be fun, making it slightly annoying to access dairy. No, those seals exist because in the early 1900s, milk delivery was an absolute disaster zone of crime and public health violations, and people were dying because of it. Back then, milk wasn't sold in stores the way it is now. It was delivered door to door by milkmen who would leave open glass bottles on your porch. Which sounds quaint and nostalgic until you realize that anyone could walk by and mess with your milk. And they did. Constantly. People would steal milk, obviously, but the real nightmare was what else they would do. They'd spit in it, pour poison in it, add water to it to dilute and resell it, or just stick their dirty hands in there for fun, because apparently humans in the 1900s were operating on pure chaos energy. There were documented cases of people intentionally contaminating milk supplies as a form of domestic terrorism or revenge, and because there was no way to tell if your milk had been tampered with, families were just out here drinking mystery liquid every morning and hoping for the best. Children were getting sick, people were dying from diseases spread through contaminated milk, and the whole system was a public health crisis wrapped in a crime wave. So finally, someone invented the sealed milk bottle with a cap that would show visible signs of tampering. And suddenly, it became way harder to poison your neighbor's breakfast without getting caught. The invention didn't just reduce theft, it literally saved lives by making it obvious when someone had messed with the product. And now, every time you peel back that little foil seal on your orange juice or yogurt, you're participating in a legacy of "please stop poisoning each other" that we apparently still need reminders about. It's honestly kind of depressing that we had to invent tamper-proof packaging because humans can't be trusted not to commit casual bioterrorism. But here we are, living in a world where your almond milk comes with a safety seal because our ancestors were unhinged. Next up, let's talk about something you walk past every single day without thinking about it: streetlights. You probably assume streetlights were invented to help people see at night, right? To make roads safer, to let you walk home after dark without tripping over a rock or stepping in something unidentifiable? Wrong. Streetlights were invented to stop crime, specifically mugging, assault, and murder, because back in the day, cities at night were basically lawless hellscapes where anything could happen, and probably would. Before electric streetlights became standard in the late 1800s, most cities were pitch black after sunset, except for the occasional gas lamp that barely illuminated anything beyond a 3-foot radius. and criminals loved it. Darkness was their best friend, their office, their entire business model. You couldn't identify attackers. You couldn't see where you were going, and if you screamed for help, good luck to anyone trying to find you in the void. Crime rates at night were astronomically higher than during the day, and people were genuinely terrified to go outside after dark because the odds of getting robbed or worse were absurdly high. City planners and police departments were desperate for a solution, and that solution turned out to be just make it so people can see each other. Revolutionary, I know. When electric streetlights started getting installed in major cities, crime rates dropped dramatically, not because criminals suddenly developed a moral compass, but because it became way harder to commit crimes when everyone could see your face. Muggings decreased, assaults went down, and people actually started feeling safe enough to go outside at night, which was a wild concept at the time. Streetlights didn't just illuminate roads, they illuminated accountability, and criminals hated it. So yeah, every time you walk under a streetlight and feel that vague sense of safety, you're benefiting from a 19th century anti-crime initiative that was basically society saying, "We're tired of people getting murdered in alleys, let's try light." And it worked. The lesson here is that sometimes the solution to mass crime is just making it slightly more inconvenient to be a criminal. And honestly, that's the most human thing ever. Now let's talk about something sitting in your kitchen right now that you probably use at least once a week, maybe once a day if you're into meal prep or leftovers: plastic wrap and aluminum foil. These things seem so boring, so utilitarian, like they were invented purely for convenience, right? Just a way to keep your sandwiches fresh or cover a bowl of pasta so it doesn't dry out in the fridge. Nope. The widespread adoption of plastic wrap and aluminum foil was heavily pushed as a solution to food tampering and contamination, especially in the wake of several high-profile poisoning cases in the early to mid-20th century. Before these products became household staples, people stored food in open containers, cloth coverings, or just left stuff out in the open. Because refrigeration was still relatively new and food safety standards were practically non-existent. This made it incredibly easy for someone with bad intentions to tamper with food, whether it was in your home, at a market, or in a restaurant. There were cases of people poisoning food supplies as acts of revenge, sabotage, or even just for kicks. And because there was no way to tell if food had been messed with, people were getting sick and dying at alarming rates. The invention and popularization of plastic wrap and foil gave people a way to seal food so that any tampering would be visible. You'd know if someone had unwrapped your leftovers or peeled back the foil on your casserole, and that visual evidence was enough to deter a lot of would-be food criminals. It also helped with the rise of pre-packaged foods in supermarkets, which needed tamper-evident seals to assure customers that what they were buying had not been poisoned by some random person in the supply chain. And this wasn't just paranoia. There were real, documented cases of mass food contamination that led to deaths and public panic, which is why governments and food companies started investing heavily in tamper-proof packaging. So yeah, that roll of aluminum foil in your drawer isn't just for keeping your baked potatoes warm. It's a relic of a time when we had to invent ways to stop people from poisoning each other's lunches. Every time you wrap up your leftover pizza, you're participating in a social contract that says, "I trust this food hasn't been tampered with because it's sealed." And that's honestly beautiful in a depressing way. Let's move on to something you might not think about. Unless you're opening a new bottle of medicine or a jar of peanut butter, those annoying safety seals and child-proof caps that make it feel like you need an engineering degree just to access your vitamins. You know the ones: the plastic wrap around the bottle cap, the foil seal under the lid, the cap that requires you to push down and twist simultaneously like you're defusing a bomb. Those weren't invented because companies hate you and want to make your life harder, although that's definitely a side effect. These safety features were created in direct response to mass poisoning incidents and accidental overdoses that were killing people at an alarming rate. The most famous case that led to modern tamper-evident packaging was the Chicago Tylenol murders in 1982, where someone laced bottles of Tylenol with cyanide and put them back on store shelves, killing 7 people and causing nationwide panic. Before that incident, most over-the-counter medications came in bottles with simple screw-on caps and no seals, which meant anyone could open a bottle in a store, add poison, and put it back without leaving a trace. The Tylenol murders changed everything. It led to federal laws requiring tamper-evident packaging on all over-the-counter medications and food products. And suddenly every bottle had multiple layers of protection to ensure that if someone messed with the product, you'd know immediately. Child-proof caps were a separate but related innovation, created because kids were getting into medicine cabinets and accidentally poisoning themselves at horrifying rates. We're talking thousands of cases per year of children ending up in emergency rooms because they thought pills were candy. So companies started designing caps that were difficult for small children to open, but still accessible to adults. Although, let's be honest, half the time those caps are difficult for adults too, and you end up using your teeth or a butter knife to pry them open, which definitely defeats the safety purpose. But the point is, these annoying safety features exist because humans were either intentionally or accidentally poisoning each other so frequently that we had to redesign every single bottle and jar to include multiple fail-safes. So the next time you're struggling to open a bottle of aspirin at 3 in the morning with a headache, just remember that you're wrestling with a piece of packaging that exists because someone in the 1980s thought it would be fun to commit mass murder via acetaminophen, and society decided that was unacceptable. All right, let's talk about something that completely changed the way we think about personal safety, but that most people don't even register as a crime prevention tool anymore: car locks and steering wheel locks. You probably think car locks were invented just as a basic feature of cars, right? Like, obviously you need a way to secure your vehicle so random people don't just hop in and drive away. But here's the thing, early cars didn't have locks at all. When automobiles first became commercially available in the early 1900s, they were so expensive and rare that manufacturers didn't think theft would be a major issue. Because who would steal something that only rich people owned? And that was incredibly easy to trace. Turns out everyone. Car theft became an epidemic almost immediately. And it wasn't just opportunistic teenagers joyriding for fun. Organized crime rings were stealing cars, stripping them for parts, and reselling them across state lines in what became one of the most profitable criminal enterprises of the era. Police departments were overwhelmed, insurance companies were losing their minds, and car owners were just parking their vehicles and hoping for the best, which obviously didn't work. So manufacturers started adding locks to doors and ignitions, and later, anti-theft devices like steering wheel locks and kill switches that would disable the engine if someone tried to hotwire it. These inventions didn't completely eliminate car theft, obviously, because criminals are persistent and adaptable, but they made it significantly harder and riskier to steal a car, which reduced theft rates enough that people could actually own vehicles without assuming they'd be stolen within a week. And the evolution didn't stop there. Modern cars have immobilizers, GPS tracking, alarm systems, and biometric locks, all because we're still fighting the same battle against car thieves that we were fighting over 100 years ago. So yeah, that little button you press to lock your car doors, that's a crime prevention tool with a century-long history of stopping people from just taking your stuff, and it's honestly wild that we still need it. You'd think by now humans would have evolved past, I see something I want, so I'm just going to take it. But nope. We're still out here locking our cars because apparently that's too much to ask. Now, let's get into something that feels almost too mundane to be on this list, but that was absolutely revolutionary in its time: barcodes. Those little black and white lines on every product you buy, the ones that cashiers scan at checkout without giving them a second thought. Those were invented primarily to prevent theft and fraud in the retail industry, which was losing billions of dollars annually to shoplifting, employee theft, and pricing scams. Before barcodes became standard in the 1970s, stores had to manually price every item with stickers or stamps, and employees had to manually enter prices at the register, which created endless opportunities for theft and human error. Shoplifters would swap price tags, putting a cheap sticker on an expensive item and paying pennies for something worth $50. And dishonest employees would intentionally ring up items at lower prices for their friends, or just pocket cash by not ringing up items at all. Inventory management was a nightmare because there was no automated way to track what was selling, what was being stolen, and what was sitting in the back room, so stores were constantly losing money without even knowing where it was going. The invention of the barcode changed everything. It created a standardized, automated system for pricing and tracking products that made it nearly impossible to commit the same scams that had been plaguing retailers for decades. Every item had a unique identifier that was linked to a central database, so you couldn't just swap a sticker and hope the cashier wouldn't notice, and inventory systems could track every single product, from the warehouse to the checkout counter, making it way easier to identify theft patterns and loss prevention issues. Barcodes didn't eliminate retail theft entirely, because again, humans are nothing if not creative when it comes to crime, but they reduced it enough that the technology became standard across the entire industry within a couple of decades. So yeah, that annoying beep you hear at the grocery store checkout, that's the sound of an anti-theft system that's been quietly stopping people from scamming retailers for over 50 years. And honestly, it's one of the most successful crime prevention inventions in modern history, even though nobody thinks about it that way. Let's talk about something that feels incredibly modern, but that was actually invented way back in the 1800s as a direct response to crime, the telegraph, and later, the telephone. You probably think these communication technologies were invented just to make it easier for people to talk to each other over long distances, right? And sure, that was part of it. But one of the major driving forces behind the development and widespread adoption of these technologies was the need for faster communication between law enforcement agencies to catch criminals who were exploiting the slowness of information travel. Before the telegraph, if a criminal committed a crime in one town and then fled to another town 50 miles away, there was basically no way for the first town to warn the second town in time to catch the guy. Communication was limited to physically sending a person on horseback or by stagecoach to deliver a message, which could take hours or days. And by that time, the criminal was long gone, probably halfway across the state committing more crimes. This made it incredibly easy for criminals to operate across wide areas without ever facing consequences, and law enforcement agencies were desperate for a solution. The telegraph allowed police departments to send instant messages to each other, warning about criminals, sharing descriptions, and coordinating arrests in real time, which was an absolute game changer for crime prevention and law enforcement. For the first time in history, information could travel faster than a person on horseback, and criminals suddenly had to deal with the fact that their crimes could be reported and responded to almost immediately, even if they fled to another jurisdiction. The telephone took this even further, making communication even faster and more accessible, and it became a critical tool for reporting crimes, calling for help, and coordinating emergency responses. So yeah, the phone in your pocket, it's a direct descendant of a technology that was developed in part to stop criminals from exploiting slow communication systems. And that legacy continues today with things like emergency hotlines, Amber Alerts, and instant communication between law enforcement agencies around the world. Every time you call 911 or see a missing person alert on your phone, you're using a crime prevention tool that's been evolving for over 150 years. All right, let's talk about something that literally everyone uses, but that almost nobody thinks about in terms of crime prevention: standardized currency with anti-counterfeiting features. You know how modern money has all those weird security features like watermarks, color-shifting ink, security threads, holograms, and microprinting that make bills look like they were designed by a paranoid graphic designer. Those features weren't added because governments wanted money to look cool. They were added because counterfeiting was such a massive problem that it was threatening entire economies. Back in the day, when currency was less standardized and didn't have sophisticated anti-counterfeiting measures, fake money was everywhere, and I mean everywhere. People were printing their own bills in basements, altering real bills to increase their value, and passing off counterfeit currency at such high rates that nobody could trust whether the money they were receiving was real or not. This created massive economic instability, because if a significant portion of the money in circulation is fake, the whole system breaks down, inflation skyrockets, people lose faith in the currency, and you end up with a barter economy, where everyone's trading chickens for bread because nobody trusts paper anymore. Governments realized they needed to make it as difficult as possible to counterfeit money. So they started adding more and more complex security features that required specialized equipment and expertise to replicate. Modern currency is basically a tiny work of art designed specifically to be impossible to fake without access to industrial printing equipment and proprietary materials. So yeah, that $20 bill in your wallet? It's not just money, it's a battlefield in an ongoing war between governments and criminals. And the reason it has all those weird features is because humans cannot be trusted not to print fake money if given the opportunity. Every time you hold a bill up to the light to check the watermark, you're participating in a centuries-old tradition of, is this real, or did someone just scam me? And honestly, the fact that we still need to do this is both impressive and depressing. So here's the thing, after learning about all these everyday products that were invented specifically because humans were committing crimes at mass scale, you start to realize that civilization is basically held together by a series of increasingly elaborate solutions to the problem of people are terrible to each other. We've had to invent tamper-proof seals, streetlights, car locks, barcodes, communication systems, and even the way our money looks, all because at some point in history, enough people were stealing, poisoning, or scamming each other that society collectively said, okay, we need to make this harder. And the wildest part is that most of these solutions are still necessary today. We haven't evolved past needing them. We've just gotten so used to them that we don't even notice they're there. So take a second and think about what you realized while watching this. Maybe it's that you've been taking these crime prevention tools for granted. Maybe it's that you're impressed by how creative humans are at solving problems. Or maybe it's that you're depressed by how much effort we have to put into stopping each other from doing terrible things. Drop a comment and let me know what powerful insight hit you during this video, because I'm genuinely curious what stood out to you. And if you enjoyed this dive into the bizarre history of ordinary objects, let me know in the comments so I can make more videos like this, because apparently the intersection of crime history and everyday products is way more interesting than anyone expected. Thanks for watching, and remember, the next time you peel back a safety seal or lock your car doors, you're participating in a legacy of humanity saying, please stop being criminals, that stretches back over a century. And honestly, that's kind of beautiful.